chats. You guys will be chatting with them. We had been discussing this and previously, and she was like, oh, you're painting fabric, like you're gonna paint on fabric. No, we're actually painting an image of fabric because it's something that does reoccur over and over and over again in artwork. Whether you're painting a still life or figurative, like, you know, sometimes people are wearing clothes, sometimes there's drapery involved on, like, you know, the table, or even underneath your model if it's a nude model. You know, fabric makes its way into our paintings all of the time, and it's not a super easy thing to paint until you start practicing. So I wanted to go over some basic techniques for you guys to approach painting fabric. I am going to be using acrylics, but I can always kind of discuss how to switch the idea into oils or watercolors. But it's going to be a pretty fun class. Now, if you are interested in anything that I'm using on the show today, make sure to go to the website JerrysArtarama.com and type in today's class code. Now that is JL333. 333. So Jerry's Live 333. If you type in JL333 into, how many times can I say that? If you type that into the search bar, the teacher's cart should come up and you can check out everything that I'm using there. So let's jump into this class. So I have, we're going to be working from life today. So I have some examples of fabric. I wanted to get a couple different types of fabric because not all fabric is created equal in the sense of how you would approach painting them. Now, the beginning, yes, you're going to want to approach them in a similar way, but sometimes fabric is real flimsy, like this is floppy, like this wants to hang and drape really, really softly, whereas like a stiffer fabric might not hang the exact same way. Something that's a little bit thicker, like canvas, if you get like a raw on the roll canvas, even if you use that as drapery, that hangs in a different way. So I wanted to get a couple different examples, and I wanted to show you a couple different ways of approaching. So if we switch that overhead, I'm going to stick this green sort of velvet on the table, and I'm going to kind of try and work with it in front of me. Now you guys are going to have a slightly different view than I am because I am looking at it from this direction and you guys are getting a top-down view, but it's kind of the same concept, right? So I'm going to try and give myself a little bit of visual interest where there's like a couple wrinkles and things, but not a ton of that because honestly, we are not going to have a ton of time to go over all of the painting for all the different types of fabric I have. And since it was JL333, I have 3 options. So we're going to go over velvet first, this lovely green velvet. Very excited. And also, if you do have any questions in the process of this, feel free to pop your questions in the comments. If you're over on Instagram or TikTok, feel free to jump over to YouTube or Facebook where you can see a larger, more high resolution version of this screen, and you can be in the chats that way. So I am using the Centurion Universal Primed Linen Painting Panel. It's a little 6x6 panel, comes in a 3-pack, but they're universal primed, which is great for acrylics. And then I am using also the Lucas Krill Studio mixing set. It comes in this box, but they are, I believe it's 100 milliliters each paint. Now I'm not going to use all 9 colors that are in the set for every painting. I'm going to pick my colors according to the fabric that I'm painting, right? So this is a green fabric, so I'm going to need green. Now, granted, this is the only green I have in the set, and this is a Viridian Phthalo, so it's going to lean really blue. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't specifically choose the right colors for this. Like if I got a olive green, that would have been perfect for this. But I'm working with the mixing set because I wanted to show you guys how to approach mixing color. So there's a couple different ways you can make greens, even if you don't have a phthalo Viridian. I'm going to show you that real quick. And while I'm popping paint out on my palette, do we have any questions thus far? I know we're really early in the process, so probably not, but just in case. All right, so what I'm putting on my palette right now, I'm gonna actually need the white as well. I'll put that a little bit over here. So I have my phthalo viridian, which is that blue-green, and I can actually pop that down here. So you can see that is the wrong green. That is a really blue-green, right? So my initial reaction would be to add a little yellow, right? Now if I add a little yellow to that, that is very green, but it's still the wrong green, right? So if I were to take that, I can make a really lovely lime green. Now keep that in mind for later because I have some highlights on this, you know. I can also take a blue and mix it in with the yellow. Makes a different type of green. It's getting closer, but it's not quite there. And then I'm gonna also just kind of wipe this off a little bit. Now if I take the blue and mix in some yellow ochre because it's a more neutral yellow. That's a little too much blue. It kind of makes mud in the green realm, but we're still not to that olive green. Now, one of the loveliest greens that I've ever been able to make is black and yellow. And it does make a more naturalistic kind of olivey type green. And it's still not quite there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix all this together.
Also, just to reiterate, we will not be painting on the fabric today.
Yes, we are not painting on fabric. We are painting a picture of fabric, right? So if I take that yellow mixed with the black and I pop in that viridian, a little bit of blue. It's still not perfect, but it's a lot closer to that, right? Now, this is what I'm considering like the local color of my fabric. That's the first thing I do really is I am going to just paint the local color of whatever it is that I'm painting. And I mean cover your entire canvas. Now, as thrilling as it would be for you to sit here and watch me paint this whole square green, I figured that might be a little boring, so I just kind of prepared it for in advance. So there's my green. It's still a little bit different from this because I did mix it, and it shifted darker because it is acrylic, so you have to remember it is going to shift darker, which is okay. But the reason why I wanted to mix that local color and keep it on my palette is because I'm going to use this kind of as a, what's the term for it? Like a mother color. And then I'm going to work off of this, and I'm going to continue to tint this color for all of the highlights and the shadows. And I think that's technically the term is it's like a mother color. It's weird, but it's the mama green. All right, so we have just a green square. It's not perfectly covered. This is just a study. You don't have to go crazy and get really detailed and like, this is not a precious painting, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take a filbert brush. This is a size 8. I just want something that's not huge, but also not tiny, and kind of, I can just quickly sketch on here because I want to either sketch my shadows or my highlights. You can go either way with acrylics. With oils, you want to go from dark to light, and with watercolors, you go the opposite direction, light to dark. So you're going to want to start with your lights, and you cannot do this for watercolor. You can do this with the oils, and then you can kind of wipe it back, but that's a different process. So when it comes to my shadows, I can just add black because I did add black to make this color. So it's going to give me kind of a darker, almost gray kind of green. But I don't want to lose that kind of vibrancy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of that phthalo viridian in there too, with the black, to give me almost like just a really dark green that kind of leans a little bit more towards the blue. And then I'm just going to sketch in quickly some wrinkles. And again, I can't quite do the whole thing, so I'm gonna kind of just do a couple of little shapes here. I'm kind of tilting this towards me because I do have to have this kind of angled to where I can see what I'm doing, but I'm gonna put it down in just a second, because that when you're sketching from life, you definitely want to have the surface of your canvas flush with your face and your eyes, so that way you're not getting any distortion.
I have a question.
Okay.
Tara on Facebook asked if you find using acrylic paint or oil paint better for painting fabrics.
So the reason why I went with acrylic is because acrylic I find is harder because it is a lot of layering. And you have transparency in acrylics that you don't have in the same sense with oils. Oils are one of those ones where like I could have this painted photorealistically in like an hour. With acrylics, it might take me a little bit longer, but that's why I wanted to show you this process with acrylics. Neither are wrong or bad. It's just different. So sorry for the sort of non-answer. But yeah, it's just a little different. Personally, I do love me some oils. I think oils is probably one of my favorite mediums of all time, but that is just me personally. Okay, so that's just gonna have to be what I do here. So I have a wrinkle coming down and over and forming almost like a little triangle here. I'm going to kind of focus on that. Hopefully there's not too much of a glare. I can kind of try and angle it up to where you guys can see. Right? So I just kind of blocked in. There's sort of a shadow shape here. There's a shadow here. It kind of goes that way. I am not making anything precious. This is not perfect. It is just a sketch. Just to get an idea of painting fabric. And the great thing about fabric is that it's such an organic material. Who's gonna know that's not perfect? How would they know? No one's gonna know. So there's sort of my shadows in just this little area. Now again, I can get full detailed and start adding all the little different wrinkles and things. I'm not gonna worry about that. But that's my shadow colors, but it's still not the darkest dark. This is what I mean by acrylics take a little bit longer. This is just me blocking it in. I can still get darker than this. But before I do that, I want to get lighter. So I'm going to go for my highlights. Now, remember I'm using this like mother color. So if you go for highlights, a lot of people, especially at the beginning of their painting, sorry, I dropped some water on there. A lot of people who are beginners to acrylic painting immediately want to add white. Now when we add white, that gives us a very chalky green. And while that does have a place in our painting, that is not what I would consider a great highlight color. It does take the value of your color higher and make it lighter, but it desaturates it. It kind of ruins that saturation that you're kind of looking for. And if you're looking at this fabric, all those little highlights that are all over this tend to lean yellow. So what I'm going to do, instead of adding white, I'm going to add more yellow. And so that brightened my color, but it didn't kill the saturation. So now I'm going to do exactly what I just did, like with the shadows, and I'm going to do the same thing with my highlights. Now I had too much paint on my brush, so I'm going to try and knock it off. Now the reason why I'm not being super precious with this is because you're going to add layers and layers and layers and layers. And the more layers you add, the better this is going to look. But when it comes to painting something like velvet, velvet tends to absorb light. Whereas like in a second you'll see satin, which is going to essentially reflect everything. So this just kind of takes the light and kind of sucks it in. So when it comes to that, it's just one of those things where like the colors and the lights and everything, try to continue to observe what you're seeing and kind of how you're actually seeing it. Now, the thing with this particular fabric is that it's fuzzy. And so if I paint it nice and smooth with really perfect transitions and gradations, it's not gonna look fuzzy. So right now I'm just blocking in those colors, but later on in the process, you're gonna want to pay attention to your brush strokes and this scrumbling, it's technically I guess called scumbling. I always add an R in there for whatever reason, where I'm just kind of scrubbing in the color. That's okay. It's that roughness is actually going to lean into the texture of that fabric. So it's going to help you in the long run. Now, if you are painting something that's super soft and has those beautiful transitions like satin, that's one of those things where you're going to want to not scrub as much, and you're going to want to get those transitions that are nice and soft and smooth. Now, even though I added in highlights, this is again still not the lightest light that I'm going to do. At this point in time, I might add just a touch of white to my yellow green, the one that I've already added yellow to, right? So it gives me just a little bit lighter version. Now I'm going to actually get rid of this brush, the filbert that I've been working with. The reason why is because I need something that has, and I was using these early, so they're a little wet, which is kind of perfect. So if I get my brush wet, this is a super shader, which is essentially just a flat brush, right? If I get it wet and I kind of flick the bristles, this is why I kind of love golden Taklon. This is the bristle is a golden Taklon. It's great for acrylics. It's kind of a workhorse, and I tend to beat up my brushes when it comes to acrylic painting, especially when something's fuzzy and in this technique. So you can see how the bristles kind of splay apart a little bit, but like they're still clumped together. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want, because then I'm gonna take just the tip of the bristles, tap it into that, and then I'm going to almost tap it into the surface of my my painting. So you can see that texture is going to lean into the velvet fabric that I'm working with. Now I can layer, this is almost like stippling. I can layer this over and over and over again and shift those colors, because it's really like, once I start I'm almost dry brushing at this point. I start with my brightest section when I have my paintbrush really loaded, and then I kind of fluff it off away from that really bright highlight, because I'm getting less and less paint on my brush. So that's going to help me kind of get that sort of transition from having the brighter highlight to a lesser vibrant kind of section. Now, it's good to have a couple different sizes of brushes. Honestly, this 8 size, where it's like almost half the size of this number 12, it's a filbert versus the super shader. This would be better for those like transitions where, I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me see if I can find a spot. Okay, so, and I'm looking at the camera so I can hopefully see what you guys see. I don't know if you can see, okay, here, right here. This line right here, where that turns in space, that highlight gets real thin and real bright right at that thin turn. So what I'm gonna do for that is the exact same thing, but I'm gonna start using that flat end. This is why I love a flat or a filbert. I'm gonna start using that to just do almost like a same stipple motion, but I'm gonna do like a line to where it's real concentrated just on the edge of that fabric. Just like that. Because velvet tends to have a whole lot of highlights on just the edges of this fabric. We have a question?
It was mostly just the glare thing. Are you able to potentially...
I'm trying to hold it to where, yeah. Actually, I wonder if we might be able to transition into like a side view camera. I don't know if that's going to help. I'm going to try and hold this in my hand. Is that helpful? I hope that's taking off the glare. How does it look for you guys? Is that better?
Well, I'm behind, so.
I know there's a bit of a delay, so 1 second. We'll try and fix that.
It's tilted up like towards you a little more. It's pretty good.
Okay.
It's when it's flat, it's really hard to get it.
Which is funny because as it tilts up and it's perfect for the camera, there's a bit of a glare on it for me, so I'm going to start doing weird side painting like this. So as long as you guys can see it, it's okay.
You can try the side angle if you want.
I mean,
we're
going to just do a little bit more on this because I do want to transfer over to some of the other fabrics, right? Now, if you keep layering and layering and layering, what's cool is that if you want to, you can start shifting these colors. So like if I get a more blue, I'm going to keep that green still in there. So like just a touch of that green in, and I'm going to lighten that up. I'm going to add some blue. That's way too much of that. Nope, still need that mother color to keep it in that green realm. So I'm going to make this almost like really light blue-green. This is where if you start playing with your colors, it's really, really fun. And I'm going to super light touch with this, where you're getting almost like a reflective light just on the side of this one highlight where it starts turning in space. And it kind of shifts from that like yellowy to the blue. But what's funny, yeah, let's try and do that side camera here. Might be, oh, is that better? I don't know if that's, can you see that better? Hopefully. 1 second. Does that look better? Okay, cool. All right, so hopefully this will work better. I can always, of course, drip more water on there, but hopefully that will, I can always shift it like this if you need to. But if you do something like this and you decide that there's too much blue, you can go back in with that same yellowy green, and actually I'm using the wrong brush here. Tap in just a little bit more and bring that blue kind of down just a little bit to almost like have it be more of a transition. Because that's the thing with the shadows. What's great is that if you start leaning them more towards, even though we have that mother color, if you start leaning them more towards like the cooler colors, so even if I were to take a permanent violet and add that to my palette here, not a ton, I don't need a ton. I actually think I squeezed out a little too much paint. I'll have to do a little bit less next time. If I add a little bit of purple and a little bit of black to that green that I have going on, sorry, I'm mixing color here. Then what I can do for the shadows is the same exact thing that I'm doing for the highlights, but just tap in that darkness and kind of work from the darkest section and kind of almost fluff it out to where it's getting lighter and lighter. And I'm using less pressure as I'm getting into those lighter sections. That makes any sense? Your question?
Do you do anything to keep your colors from drying out?
So that's a great question. If you, and actually maybe if we go back to the overhead camera so I can show this. If you guys have an issue with, like, if you mix that mother color and you mix a big quantity because you have a big section of your painting that you're working on and you want to save a big chunk of it and keep it off to the side to where it doesn't dry out, because acrylics do dry fast. These are great. This is our double take palette cups. I love these because I can just take a palette knife and scoop it and dump it in here. Now, what I'm actually have in here, and I just close this so I can tilt it sideways, is a glazing medium, which is actually a combination of both of the Creative Inspirations acrylic medium. It is a medium and a varnish, so it kind of is like a 2-in-1, which is great. One is gloss, one is matte. I like satin finish, so I take both, mix them in a big bottle, and then distribute it as needed. So if I do find that some of my paints are drying on me, and I'm like in the middle of painting, instead of reaching for water to reactivate your paints, reach for just a little bit of this and get it on your brush, and then you can go back in and almost reactivate it to a point. That will only work for so long. So when your paint starts drying on your palette and you start doing that, if you ever notice that it picks up chunks, that means that your acrylic has dried too much. But if you utilize the little palette cups, then you can always scoop out a little bit more. That's a really, really good way to kind of keep your colors as you're going. So this you can layer and layer and layer and layer and layer and layer until you get to the point where it's fabric. And you can transition from like, that's that that color of the green mixed with white instead of that yellow. So it has almost like that blue kind of transition color where you get that reflective light just on that one side. That's one of those ones where you can kind of have it pop through here and there. So that is velvet. I am sorry. I feel like I want to spend all day on this, but we have so much more fabric to go over. And if you do have any more questions about these, and I can even pop the scans of these into our Jerry's Life Facebook group if you guys are interested, and we can talk about it more over there. If you do want to join and you're not a member already, you can jump over to Facebook. It's Jerry's Life Facebook group. It's free to join. There's like 7,000 people in there. It's a really fun community where people just ask for help, or if they have questions on the process or something like this. I sometimes pull you guys on ideas. So yeah, all kinds of fun things happen over there. So I can scan those and get them over to you guys that way. Now, I definitely squeezed out a little too much paint. I'm going to put that off to the side so I can use it later. How about that? I am now going to show you satin, which is difficult. So bear with me on this one. We have like a satin, silky kind of material. This is so reflective. I am sure you can see that on camera. It has this is why I don't wear this, because it shows every lump and bump and nook and cranny, and I eat way too many cupcakes. So me and this material do not agree, but it is wonderful to paint. And it's one of those things where this in particular is going to take you a while. So this color is very similar to, like, again, I start with my my sort of local color. I almost said mother color again. It's local color. I'm going to start with that. Now, it's really, really similar to the cadmium red deep hue that I have in here. But I did add just a touch of the alizarin crimson to get that color. And I'm going to do that again here. And while I do that, it looks like we have a question.
Yes, those plastic cups you were showing us earlier, can those be used with oil paint?
Yes, they can. I have used those for oil paint. I actually have taught a class and distributed paint in these, which is absolutely lovely. Now, I wouldn't put solvent in these, so if you have any mediums, I would suggest you use a metal cup. This is great for oil paint because oil paint itself just doesn't have any solvent. But yes, it can work for oil paint. Absolutely. All right, so cadmium red deep and just a touch of alizarin crimson just to give me a little bit of a deeper red. Now, this one's going to take me a while to build up all the layers. Now, that being said, I am going to just jump ahead and show you the fun finished painting. So, I do want to have this off to the side so you guys can see kind of where I'm going with this, because I am not going to get anywhere near this level just because of all the transitions on this. This is just one of those ones that is going to take a second to build up, right? So like I did, with the green. I also started with just a base color of my local color. This is just red, and I'm gonna do the exact same process. So I'm gonna take, where did my brushes go? And they're covered in green paint. 1 second, sorry. I'm mostly gonna take this super shader. Love me a flat brush, especially this size. It's one of my favorites. Okay, so I'm gonna do the exact same thing, and I'm going to go from, I'm gonna add in my darks, and I'm gonna also add in the highlights. Now, I already painted that, so let's do something a little bit different here. How about that? Now I'm gonna add in, excuse that black color, and how to get a little tooty. All right, so I have the iron oxide black. This is my permanent violet. I'm going to add in a yellow as well, and then a little bit of white. Because satin is one of those colors, or one of those materials that is surprising. So, if I have the shades of this fabric, I'm gonna probably just focus on like this right here, just because it's gonna take me so long to do this. If I want to add in the darks to this is a little bit, what's the term? Where it's like, I cannot, not conceited. There's the word.
What you going for?
It tricks you. Sorry.
Deceptive.
Deceptive.
That's what
There we go.
But I didn't know where we were going.
I'm great at words. This is just, bear with me here. Yes, so it's a little deceptive in the sense of what your shadows are. So I'm going to jump in. Again, if you add just black to this red, you do get a kind of lovely, I did add a little bit of purple over here. So let me actually do this. Take a little bit of red, add a little bit of black. It does give you kind of a purpley color, right? And it's a really deep color, which is beautiful, and absolutely use it. I highly recommend. Now I'm going to actually start with that. If I do want a slightly lighter color that is a little bit more saturated, I'm going to go with that purple. So I'm going to just kind of block in here, hopefully, there, yeah, hopefully there's not glare there. Block in. Now when it comes to also painting something like this where it's like satin, don't move. If you're going to be painting for a long time, get a chair, because anytime you shift and move, all of your shadows and all of your highlights also shift and move. So if you're somebody who's like active and kind of dancing around as you paint, you gotta stay still, because it's one of those things where you definitely will shift all of those colors so fast. Yes, we have a question?
Yeah, what type of lighting, I will call them scapes, would you say would work best for like satin and velvet? Like a brighter light, like a...
like still life lighting, like gallery lighting, or not gallery, studio lighting. Like currently we have all of the lights on. I can't control the amount of light that hits this because of the fact that if we turned off certain lights so that I'd have the most beautiful light ever hitting this, and just maybe going like a key light coming from just the one side, that's one of those things where it would be lovely, but you guys would never see what I'm doing.
And also they could use the new lights we have.
Oh yes, we have the Color View Lux. Those are great. So those right there, the Color View Lux are really wonderful if you are lighting like either a still life or a figure, all of it. It's really great because it's an LED, so it doesn't get hot. It is battery operated. You can plug it in, and you can control the temperature. So currently I am surrounded by a whole lot of cool lights. So all of the lights hitting this are pretty blue. So that is going to also affect your highlights. If you have a blue light hitting the green velvet, you're going to have those highlights tend to shift towards blue. If you have a yellow light, like a warm light, or even sunshine outside, that's a pretty warm light. If you have those hitting your green fabric, it's going to shift towards yellow. So keep that in mind when you're painting. It's going to be one of those things where your lights will affect the color. but it's definitely something to play with, and I highly recommend fiddling around with all kinds of studio lights and still lifes and setting them up and playing with it that way. All right, so this tends to, like this entire section right here that I'm painting, because I can see like sort of into this like fold, it's all in shadow, but there are areas where it does shift a little bit in value. So if I add just a little bit of white to this purple mixture, it gives me a lighter value that I can use in my shadows that keeps it still looking like shadow. And because if I were to shift that color value the same way that I shift my highlights, then it's going to look like a highlight and it's going to look like light's hitting it. So my shadows, even though this entire section of the fabric is in shadow, sorry, I have a glare on there, it's going to be a lot darker than in the highlight areas. So I am going to start shifting to a little bit more yellow. And yes, I have a dirty brush. Right now I have purple and red on there, and that's okay because it does make a little bit of mud, but that's all right. Mud is beautiful. Also, the one thing to note, especially with something like this, anything around it is going to reflect into it. So if I have even when this is like white, if I have a fabric that's white or red or whatever it may be, and like a blue cup, that blue cup is going to reflect in the fabric, and that fabric is going to also reflect into your like blue cup. So you got to keep those in mind as well when you're looking for color. Now I'm going to take a little bit of this and transition to a orangey color, because yellow and orange, or yellow and red make orange. Now this orangey color is not right for my highlights. It's hard to tell on camera. I think it's looking far more orangey than it does in real life. But it's one of those things where if I put that down, it doesn't quite look right. So it's actually more of a coral color, something like that. So I'm going to also just pop in that highlight that goes over here. And this is where I wanted to just kind of show you this. That highlight right there, kind of get most of that paint off my brush. If I wanted to shift that highlight to like a more orangey color, real light touches. But then they can kind of just, if you go back on top of that red, it's shifting from that like really saturated orange to this. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure that you guys can see too. So this is where at the very beginning you're going to want to have most of your colors just kind of blocked in. Again, you want to be kind of on the softer side with the satin, because you don't want a whole lot of texture. So I'm doing a really light brush with the, can we go to that side camera? That might be a little bit easier. I'm trying to also not get paint all over this. There we go. Try and move that without moving the rest of the fabric, sorry. All right, so there we go. If I am really light on the touch with that, it gives me a softer transition. Again, also why I really love the Golden Taklon is because it's a softer brush. It has more of that softness to it. Now before that dries, I'm going to go back in with that mother color and kind of that local color and kind of blend back into it. Again, if it doesn't perfectly match the background, that's okay. But this one is definitely takes a minute to really build everything up. It's so hard to paint satin. So instead of reaching for that, I almost reached for water. I'm reaching for my medium here. So if I do reach for a medium, what's great is that I can also get a little bit more transparency and get a little bit darkness here. I can start, it's really hard to show with, I have a glare on here, sorry. We are fighting the glares today. There we go. So this entire section is in shadow. Yeah, and this right here is also really choppy right now, and that's okay because I can go back on top and layer and layer and layer and layer. And I can also fluff out those edges, again, with that really light touch. Now, if you ever notice that you're picking up your paint, let that section dry, because that's one of those things where sometimes acrylic paint, if you're working too much with a layering process and you're trying to put layer on top of a layer and that previous layer has not dried, that's one of those things where you're going to want to make sure that you allow it to really dry. Let me kind of, sorry, for the reach, I gotta clean off my brush real quick because it is getting a little loaded down with paint. So now that I've gotten mixed that purple color with my coral color and go for like a little highlight here, and I'm using the wrong brush. I do this a lot. I'm married to my brushes. Don't be married to your brushes. That's gonna really help you if you don't do this. But I do love a flat brush because you can use that corner and kind of drag along those flat edges if you need to. And get almost like a line. But smarter way is to use a round brush. All right, so again, it's building up those layers. You start with a darker color and then you build up the highlights where that way, as you layer, you really start to pull out those shadows and the highlights and then keep that bright original color, let me put this down, as your mid-tone, and that way you push and pull. Now, again, I wanted to show you this with the satin, where that fabric kind of curves and bends, you tend to get really bright, really crisp highlights along those edges. Whereas like with the velvet, it was a little fluffy. This is a really bright highlight. You can have like really nice soft transitions in them, like in where it kind of starts to flatten out a bit, but you will have core shadows coming through on almost both sides of that highlight, really making it pop and really making it look quite reflective, which also, this is a really lovely way of approaching water if you want to paint water as well. But as you can see, I did keep purples in my shadows. My highlights are that kind of coral, where it's the red mixed with yellow and a little bit of white. And I tried to make sure, if you look at this, there's no actual bright white in this. I can actually show you real fast. This is technically going to ruin this, but this is pure white. And you can see that is nowhere else in this painting. The reason why is because satin tends not to be pure white. I'm gonna actually kind of knock that down a little bit with a little bit of water because I don't want to ruin it.
It hurt your heart too much, didn't it?
It did a little bit. But yeah, there's usually within satin or silk, I got a little scribble of something on there. There's usually no pure white unless you have a really bright highlight where the light is almost touching your fabric and it's just so blown out that that's all you can see and it's reflecting that much light. But usually it doesn't even get to a pure white on there. which is pretty fun. So we have one last fabric to cover, and that is denim, because, ooh, I almost put that in paint. We have a lot of people who sometimes you paint figurative, and people wear blue jeans, and you know, you gotta have the ability to paint denim. So with this, let me actually move this palette off of here. Any last minute questions for satin? Again, I am going to pop those over into the Jerry's Life Facebook group, so that way we can talk about it more over there, and I can give you guys some more pointers one-on-one. That way, if you're having some struggles with painting fabric, we can do it that way. I might want to go to that overhead camera real quick, because this is going to be more color mixing. So I have blue jeans, and I also do take sandpaper, and I sanded a hole in it because I wanted to show you how to approach when you get like those frayed edges. And like, as you can see here with where I really started sanding it, the blue jeans, as they wear down and you get them nice and, you know, worn in and comfy, they tend to lighten up, because the more you wash your jeans, the more you're going to get a kind of an indigo, the dye tends to go away a little bit more. So let me actually just push this back just a little bit here. So I wanted to kind of show you how to approach. We can actually keep this one kind of more flat, so that way I'm not dealing with a ton of wrinkles and stuff. So I painted it blue, but it's not the same blue that comes in the kit either. Now with blue jeans, anytime you get a paint that's called indigo, you're going to be in the realm. Most paint kits are going to come with an ultramarine or a cobalt blue. So I wanted to quickly show you how to shift those to kind of look more naturalistic with your blue jeans. So we have ultramarine. We have the ivory black that I just got all over my hand. And then white. And then I'm going to also put out a little bit of the yellow ochre and purple. Right? Because I love purple for my shadows, okay? So again, I covered the whole thing, but to make this color, what I did was I took ultramarine blue, mixed a little bit of white, and a little bit of black. Because that makes a gray, so when you take your blue and you mix it with gray, you get kind of a more desaturated gray blue, which looks a lot more like blue jeans. Now I actually need a lot more than that. I'm gonna actually just take both piles. How about that? All right. Now blue jeans do tend to come in all kinds of different shades of blue. So really try and look at the color that you're working with. I think that got a lot lighter than this one did. But again, mixing color when it comes to working with a palette where you're mixing your own, I love not mixing too much paint. I like not saving my paint because that forces me to continue to mix my colors. It's really great practice as far as like when you're trying to get familiar with color and how to make the right kind of color that you're seeing in real life, right? So when it comes to shadows, I'm going to need a little bit more white and black on my palette now that I used most of it. Now blue jeans are going to work a lot like cotton in case you are looking for that as well. It's not, this one in particular is not super heavy. It's going to kind of flow the same way. So the thinner your fabric, the more wrinkles and things you're going to get. The thicker your fabric, the more like soft drapes you're going to have. That doesn't include if you have like a full fold and wrinkle in there, but typically speaking, that's what you're going to find. So I'm going to make this a little bit darker by mixing again black. Makes a lovely gray blue, right? Then I'm going to just kind of, the whole is going to be, actually let's take a solid black there. That's where the frayed bit's gonna be. And then there's a bit of a shadow here. And then kind of works off that way. And then we'll even address this wrinkle down here. And then kind of just scratch it in, kind of a thing. Now I'm gonna add a little bit more purple for saturation. And I'm going to also just keep blocking that in. I might need a little bit more blue too. Here, I'm a pure ultramarine as well. So if I take ultramarine and purple, it's gonna give me a beautiful color that Amanda loves so, so much. That blue purple, it's lovely.
What do we call it? Blurple.
Hate that so much. All right, we are going to get a lot of the paint off my brush because it was too loaded down. The paint that I'm working with right here is pretty wet, so I don't want to have a ton of it on my brush because I'm gonna have a hard time kind of blending it in. If you ever have an issue with getting your colors to blend, you either don't have enough paint on there or you are too loaded down. Now, with this, I'm going to also take, because there's not a whole lot of shadows in here, right? We're going to get a little bit of this one, highlights. Now, I mixed yellow ochre in with the sort of local color that I'm working with here, and it made it look dirty. And I'm okay with that because jeans tend to get really beat up. They tend to kind of get dirty and we wear them all the time, and that's okay. Do you have a question?
Yes. Would you want this paint to have a matte finish, or does that not matter?
So it doesn't fully matter. It's all personal preference. I prefer a satin finish myself. So if you are painting with a paint that doesn't give you the finish that you like, you can always varnish it and change the sheen. All right, so because I didn't have a whole lot of shadows in here, I am going to mostly be focusing on the highlights, right? And when it comes to having not a whole lot going on in your fabric, it can be a little boring. Now I just mixed in some white in with that. Now this is the one thing I wanted to go over with blue jeans. Blue jeans has a texture. They have that weave that you can pretty much see. Like it's really prominent on the jeans that I'm wearing. It's not as prominent on this, but I still can see that texture. And it's similar to how I did the texture for the velvet, where I got most of the paint off my brush, and I am, here, let me see if I can get that to focus. You see where the bristles are kind of starting to fray apart? Because I'm kind of stabbing it into my palette. Again, don't do this with your fancy brushes because you will ruin them. I love golden Teflons for this reason, but you can take this and you can start lightly pulling it across and getting sort of a texture to your material. So it's almost like you're putting the weave into the fabric kind of surface. When it comes to this, word of warning, once you start, you have to do it all. You can't just do a little section here or there because otherwise it just looks funny. So if you don't want to do that, don't start putting the texture in. All right, so because this is pretty worn down over here, it does tend to get lighter, like I said earlier. And I am using the big brush because I want to kind of dab in some color, and I'm not being very precise. Again, this is just kind of like a study, just to kind of work on seeing if I can get, you know, the texture of jeans really well. And I'm gonna get a little bit closer to that local color that I originally mixed up. There's a little bit of shadows here and there, and while this section is still wet, if I have all those colors mixed over here, I can kind of jump back and forth between them because they're all the same blue kind of family. Right? Alright, so... Nope, that's a little too purple. And I'm being very reactive as far as the painting. So if I'm painting, and I actually think I put that shadow a little too low. If that's the case, the beautiful thing about acrylics is that you can paint right on top of them. And you can change it and shift it. And you don't have to blend. You can kind of do chunky color application with these, which is really great too. But again, be consistent in your application. If you're going to do that chunky application, you're definitely going to want to stick with it. Alright, so I'm going to kind of just pop these in, which makes it look like it's really wrinkled, and you can start to see, because I have that dark space right there, and I'm starting to pop in those bright kind of threads that are popping out of the actual jeans. It's starting to look like a bit of a hole. Alright, so let me get a little bit darker here. I'm just going to kind of pop this in. Now, with these jeans, I can also see right here, as that's turning in space to me, because I'm looking at it this direction, it gets almost like bluer, like more saturated. And if you see that, pop it in. Now, when it comes to form turning in space, you're gonna have a highlight. You're gonna, oh, that was the dark, my bad. Grab the shadow color. And I put that in the wrong spot. That's okay, I can paint over top of it. But you're gonna have a shadow, which is gonna be just like any other form. You're gonna have a shadow area where the light's being blocked. You're gonna have a highlight area where the light's hitting it, and then you're gonna have that mid-tone color. And again, I'm mixing just a little bit of yellow ochre in there. You can also mix the cadmium yellow, but I like yellow ochre more for blue jeans. It tends to get a little bit more naturalistic. Right? Just kind of pop that in. And the thinner that fold gets, the more crisp that highlight's going to be too. And while that's still wet, I can go back in with that similar mid-tone color and kind of fluff it out a little bit. It's hard to see because I'm also bending this in a way where I can't quite see what I'm painting. There you go. All right, now with I'm going to address quickly the little frayed bits because those are my favorite. So I'm going to take the yellow ochre color and then mix a bunch of white in there. Small round brush. We are going to flick in just a little bit of frayed. Actually, we definitely need to go for the side camera for this one so you guys can see. There it is. I'm going to flick in just a couple of, and there's also a little bit of frayed, what is that, strings that are popping off here. Now, note, I am not using pure white. It looks pretty bright compared to everything else, but I'm not using pure white yet. Now, these tend to get all over the place. And if you put it in the wrong spot, that's okay. No one's gonna know. How are they gonna know? All right. Almost like little monster teeth. Right? All right. Let me pull that up sideways. Now on the edges where the hole has started, you can also do a couple, I'm not actually seeing it on here, but you can see a couple, usually a couple of thin strings that are still technically attached from one side to the other. And you can kind of do that and kind of almost attach them where they go from one side to the other. Now, pure white. I still have a dirty brush, so let me actually clean it off real fast. Pure white for the last little bit. Just for a couple strings here and there. You don't want all of them. There is such a thing as too many highlights. And there you go. A little jean hole. Yeah, yes, Katie's giving me the weirdest look. So, again, as you're gonna switch to that overhead camera. As you build up your layers and start to really build up those colors, there you go, you guys can see the frayed bits a little bit better. But as you build up your colors, you can start working in that texture and start really playing with the color shift where like it looks like I got it a little dirty here because there's a little bit more of that yellow ochre. Build up your shadows to where they're darker. Always, as I'm painting fabric, I'm always like, is that as dark as I'm really seeing it? Can I push it to go darker? Or does it need to be as dark as I'm seeing it? Because if I have a really dark section and a really bright highlight, my eye is going to go straight there because that's a really big contrast between those two colors. So if I want the focus to be on the figure that I'm painting, I'm not going to put as much contrast between my highlights and my shadows. So that's one of those things when it comes to fabric, you can really start to observe and start pushing those boundaries, pushing in those shadows, pulling out the highlights and seeing how far you can push it, and then also seeing how much you can leave out and really direct the eye and see how far you can get someone to really focus on an area that you really want them to look at, like just this little jean rip, which is super fun. So again, I will put all of these fabrics, paintings into the Jerry's Life Facebook group. Any last minute questions? Kind of ran through that. I swear it always feels like we have so much time and then it's like gone every time. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was super fun for me. I feel like I need to have like 6 more of these classes on fabric painting. Put that in the chats if you guys want more details on any specific type of fabric, because there's so much about painting fabric that you could be playing around with, especially even textures and patterns and things that kind of start to move with the fabric, and you have to kind of pay attention to those things, which is so much fun. That's where I really nerd out a little bit. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Did we have any last minute questions from you guys? Hopefully, no, the delay is gone. Okay. So if you do have questions though, and we've already stopped airing, feel free to pop them into the comments and I will always go back and check those and keep up with them. Again, I will pop these into the Jerry's Life Facebook group if you want to join me over there and we can keep talking about painting fabric, which would be amazing. Or if you have questions on a painting that you're currently working on, I can also help you that way. But that was painting fabric in a nutshell. So I hope you guys enjoyed. We are going to, of course, make sure you join us next week because we have a guest. I'm so excited. It's going to be Andrew Cook. Andrew Cook is coming back on with us. We're going to be going over Sennelier watercolors and some really wonderful colors that they have. And the differences between them. So it's gonna be amazing. I hope to see you guys then, and I'll check you then. Bye!